It's good. There we go. Good morning, church. Please turn to Hebrews chapter 12, please. There's a lot in this chapter, so we'll cover about half of it. And then Pastor Dan will get the other half next week. We do not like discipline. It seems to be a human thing. We don't like discipline. Just ask your teenager. No, I'm serious. When they're little, up to what, about 5, maybe for some 2, mom and dad are everything. Then you put them in school, and they find out mom and dad aren't. And you constantly have to guide them and direct them, and you begin to feel this resistance from them. It's somewhat mild when they're littler, for some. And then as they grow older and older and older, let's say into the teens, 15, 16, 17, 18, depending on how long they're under your roof, you begin to feel this resistance because they want independence. You're raising them to be productive citizens, hopefully Christian. You're giving them the principles of the Lord. You can't go by what the world does anymore if you're a Christian. You got to go by what the Word of God says. And so therefore it runs counter to everything that's out there in the world. And they are in the world, they're in school. A lot of people can't afford private education, so they're in the public school system, and the public school system allows a lot of things. Those kids come from a very mixed background, so a lot of things begin to enter into the kids' not so much, curriculum too, but into their life and into their hearts. And the entire time you're trying to hold on to them. And not so much because you want to hold on to them because you want them to live with you till they're 40. You don't want that. But what you do want is you're trying to hold on to them spiritually. You're trying to hold on to them to give them the values. And they don't like it. I mean, they don't like it. And we can understand that on a child parental level, but it's the same thing with adults. We don't like discipline either. We don't like having to watch what we eat. We don't like having to work out. We don't like having to do all of those things. And there's just something kind of inside of you that says, somebody tells you you have to do something, there's just kind of this thing inside of you goes, I don't have to do anything. I'm not proud of this, but yesterday I almost got in a fight at Home Depot. Home Depot, right? And I'm going in and I'm looking for something very specific. And I walk up to this guy that's in the plumbing department, and he's got his hands in his pockets, and he's all puffed up. And he's a grown man, right? He's probably in his early 60s, right? So he's not a child. He's a grown man. And I began to ask him for a piece that I needed, a grounding piece for my house. And anyway, he goes, is it 220 or 110? And I go, neither one. It's just a ground. And he goes, well, I'm just trying to help you, boss, and I need to know everything. And I said, I just tried to tell you. And he just cut me off. He just cut me off. So I said, well, I'll find somebody else, to help me. So I go right down to the end of the row. I have to circle around to the next end of the row, and I realize it's in his lane anyway, so I'm going to have to go back down there. And as I'm going down there, I'm thinking, do I say anything or do I not say anything? And I'm telling you, the Missouri kicked into me. And I told him, I said, you cut me off. I didn't cut you off. I said, yeah, you cut me off. I was trying to tell you. I didn't cut you off. And I said, you did. I said, you cut me off. He goes, don't point your finger at me. I'm not going to tell you the rest of it. But I'm not proud of my response. I did say, what are you going to do about it? And he didn't, well, I'm trying to stop here and say I'm not proud of my response. But I felt like as an employee, he needed to listen a little bit to what my needs were. In his mind, he had a certain thing he thought I needed, and he began to try to, call me boss and put me down and exert his superiority over me. And I'm just trying to get a part, for Pete's sake, at Home Depot. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever get into a confrontation with one of the salespeople at Home Depot. But there's something in us. There's just something in us. There's that human nature that we get to a certain point and we just don't want any part of it. It's like I'm a pretty passive guy most of the time. But you can only push so far. Now, the kids, when they're young and they're teenagers, there comes a time in their life where they begin to grow, they begin to learn, they begin to study, and they know a lot. But they just don't have the experience that goes along with that. They've gained a lot of knowledge, they've studied a lot, but they don't have 30 or 40 years of experience to be able to put that all together, to be able to make maybe the best decisions that they could make. And so anyway, that's why we're there as parents, to be able to help them. And in the process of that, there are times when we have to kind of get a little, lay the hammer down, if you will. Not always do the kids just say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll do that. Sometimes it's like they get in your face, right? Isn't that, anybody on board with me on any of this? They're kind of in your face, and you have to kind of insist that things need to go this way in order for there to be peace in the home. Well, we're going to find out here in Hebrews that God, He's not hesitant to put on a little heat and pressure in our lives when He needs to teach us something, when we need to grow, because we are stubborn and we are sinful by nature. And God will do sometimes what He needs to do in order to get us where He needs us to be. We don't like it. We don't like it. But it's necessary, and we know that we serve a good God. And if you're a good parent, you don't like it either. You don't like it that you have to raise your voice. You don't like it when you have to go to up a notch, when you have to do that to try to get through. But sometimes it seems as though you have no choice but to do that to get through. All right, pray with me, and we are going to begin. Father, may you give us a heart that hears, a heart that will understand what it is that you're trying to teach us this morning. Lord, there's no discipline that seems good at the season, at the time, but we know that you use it for our correction. We know that you use it for good. We know that you're a loving Father. And just like the fathers and mothers here, there's some times when they've had to get a little tough, I guess, would be the word. But it doesn't make any of them feel good about having to do that, to be able to help that child grow up and mature. So, Lord, I pray that we could learn and we could grow this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So in chapter 11, we saw a partial list of the Christian heroes that have died in the faith, those who have gone before, kept their faith, stayed in the Lord. And the writer told us that this world is not even worthy of those men and women. Why is the world not worthy of those men and women? Because they're walking or trying to walk as Jesus walked. And this world does not understand that. They will not ever understand that. And we need to, as Christians, the best we can, to share Jesus with those folks so that they have an opportunity for eternity like we have found through Jesus Christ. So in verse 12, verses 1 and 2, I want to read this to you. Therefore, tied to the rest of it, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight. Now I must stop there again. Are we carrying any weight that keeps us from the Lord? I'll tell you one of the biggies is unforgiveness. One of the biggies is unforgiveness. This person hurt me, therefore it's God's fault. This happened in my life, therefore it's God's fault. And I'll tell you why Christians are so, they're the ones that sometimes have a harder time with this. Why? Because they know that nothing can come into our life except that He passes the desk of God. So when we fall into hard times, or we're in suffering or in loss, we think, why would God allow this? And our thinking begins to change. And we begin to judge God like we do our fathers, our earthly fathers. And we think, why would God allow this to happen in my life? And we begin to be bitter against the Lord. Now, we usually won't say that. A lot of times we won't say that. A lot of times we might not even know it. And we certainly won't admit it to another Christian. But if we dig down deep inside, there is an unforgiveness that we have just not given up and given over. So maybe this morning's an opportunity to get rid of that weight. Lay aside every weight and the sin which easily ensnares us. Now, here's the thing. Sin is out there at every single turn. In fact, when you get up in the morning and you get ready, you're looking at sin. Because it's kind of inherent in us. We are drawn towards sin. It's only the love of God that can separate us from that stuff. Cause us to see what's right and what's wrong and to do what's right and to stick with what we know is right. So he says, lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I love the fact that he says, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher. We talked about the relay race, right? Well, when you're passing that baton on, the only thing you got your mind on is that next finisher, right? You got to get that baton to them. So you're not looking at the crowd. You don't have your wallet out looking for how much money you got. You're looking to the finisher and trying to get that baton in their hands so they can finish the race. We need to keep our focus on Jesus Christ. He said, it is finished when he was at the cross. So what he's done for us is done. It's a finished work. Now, he lives inside of us. He's constantly speaking. He's constantly guiding us. But the cross is a finished work. You and I have to keep that in our heads and in our minds all of the time. Because there's bad behaviors that we have that need to be let go of. It gets very tiring playing the victim. Well, you just don't understand. Well, he's always this, or she's always that, or my kids are always that. Or you don't understand why I'm this way because my dad did this, or my mom did this, or the cops did this, or I don't know about you guys, but these videos that they have nowadays, it's like they get out antagonizing the policemen that are, and I'm not saying that every cop's a good cop, but there's a lot of good ones out there. Not every fireman's a good fireman, but there's a lot of good ones out there. Not every person is a nice person, but there's a lot of good people out there. My point is this: if you get out looking for a fight, you're probably going to get one. That's just as simple as it is. But my point here is that we can get sidetracked with our sin, doing what we want to do rather than keeping Jesus in mind, keeping the cross in mind, and realizing that some things are just not worth it. They're just not worth it. And if we're not careful, those things will knock us off track. All right, look at verses 3 and 4, please, of Hebrews. For consider who? Who's the him? Jesus Christ. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. So the focus is Jesus. Consider him. And when you and I think we have it bad, look at the cross. Look at the beating that he took for you and for me. When things get rough, we take a look at a holy God that laid that aside to come to earth and suffer like a criminal for me, for you. So when we think we've got it bad or we think it's tough, we're not alone. We're not alone. And when we think, well, you just don't understand, yes, he does. Maybe the people around us don't understand, but he certainly understands. He understands heartbreak. He understands the effect of sin and what kind of an effect that has on us. How about resisting sin to the point of bloodshed? Now, I don't think that I've ever resisted sin to the point of bloodshed. How about you? America's still America for now, right? And you can still believe in Jesus Christ if you want to. But there are some places where you cannot. You will be persecuted, beaten, and in some cases have to give up your life. Luke 22, verse 39 through 44, it says, "And coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives, as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. And when they came to the place, he said to them, 'Pray that you may not enter into temptation.'" So he puts them there. He says, "Pray. I'm going to go over here and spend some time with the Father." And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw. Okay? And he knelt down and he prayed, saying, "Father, if it is your will, please take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." Man, that is, you could spend weeks on that prayer alone. If it is your will. We pray, God, I want, God, I want, God, I want, God, I want. God, do this, God, do that, God, do this, God, do that. Not all the time, but sometimes we do, right? And he takes his entire situation. The future of mankind is dependent upon him. All that weight is on his shoulders. And he says, "Father, if it is your will, please take this cup away from me." I think sometimes we think that because he was Jesus and he was God and he was human, that he rose to this inhuman place to face this. And he faced it as a human being. And he says, "Dad, if it's your will, please take this cup from me. Nonetheless, not my will, but yours." Lord, not my will, but yours. I really want that new car, but if it's not your will, I don't want it. Lord, I'd like this relationship to work out, but I'm more concerned with your will than I am my will. Lord, I really want this new job, but nonetheless, I want what you want over this job. You see, I think that should be the life of a Christian. That should be the prayer of a Christian every time, that no matter what it is that we think we want or need so badly, that we're willing to say, "God, but I know that you know best. You know better than me. You can see 5 years in the future. You can see 2 years in the future. You can see when I'm 40. You can see when I'm 50. You can see when I'm 60. You know whether this is good for me or not. I don't. I don't have that kind of vision. So, Lord, take it away from me if you can, but nevertheless, let thy will be done." Then it says, an angel appeared to him from heaven and gave him strength. How cool is that? God, give me strength. Give me that peace that passes all understanding, and give me strength to face whatever it is that I'm facing. In other words, instead of running away from it, give me the ability to face it the way that you have. In verse 44, it says, and being in agony, please understand that, agony, he's in agony, horrible pain. And he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. There is a word for that. It's pronounced hematidrosis. And it's a condition in which capillary blood vessels that feed the sweat glands, they rupture and causes them to be able to exude blood. Occurring when conditions of under extreme conditions of physical or emotional stress. Wow. So that's real. That's not figurative. That's real. He was human. And this is painful. Now, let me ask you a question. What do you think the enemy was trying to do at this very moment in Jesus' life? Do you think that maybe he was trying to give him a back door? He's trying to give him a way out, to give in, to give up, to quit resisting. If you just quit resisting, everything will be okay. He could have said, I'm out. And there would have been a temporary relief, but a long-term disaster. You see, when we're in the middle of those trials, the enemy will always come with a back door. You don't have to go through this. All you got to do is compromise. All you got to do is do what the world is telling you to do. And Satan's telling him, hey, it's going to be great. Oh, you don't have to suffer like this. Just take the back door. But actually, it's the opposite that's true. When we take that back door, we miss what God is trying to accomplish in our life. And it's been my experience that I'm going to meet that back door again. And I'm going to meet that back door again. And I'm going to suffer the consequences of going out that back door every single time until I finally say, Father, not my will, but your will be done. Verses 5 and 6. And have you forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as sons? We're sons and daughters of the Lord. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. Whoa, 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 whoa. Boy, we got some things to unpack there, don't we? Two words in there that I don't like. Scourging and chastening. And it says that Jesus uses these things in our life. And it says when we fall into those temptations, to count it as joy, because that's what he counted it as, was joy. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in one of these, it's hard to do that. It's very hard to count it as joy. It's very hard to look at it and know that my Father loves me and he's doing this because he's trying to mold me into what I've asked him to from the beginning. And that's to be more like him. Yes, Lord, I want to be like you, but not like this. I want you to do it soft. I want you to do it easy. Now, in the world in which we live now, if you raise your voice at somebody, you're offending them. If you disagree with somebody, you're offending them. First, I want to look at the word chasten. It is translated elsewhere as the word to learn, to teach, to instruct, as well as to chasten. So it carries with it the parental role of mentoring and instructing so that children can grow up to be mature, productive adults. Now, when we come to know Jesus Christ, we are called babies in the Lord. They've got to mature. And they are spiritual things, which makes it even on a different level than it is to just go into a textbook and read something like you would for a science project or doing your math projects. It's spiritual things that he's trying to teach us. It's on a whole different level, if you will. But he does what he does to instruct us, to teach us, to help us to grow, to help us mature. Now, the second word is to scourge. And I think we know what that is. It comes from a word that the definition, the root word means to handle or to squeeze. And this is not a good squeeze. This is like taking an orange and putting it on one of those things that you twist it, right? And you're crushing that thing so that the orange juice comes out the bottom. In John 19:1, it says, "So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him." By the way, another definition of this word is a whip, as well as a calamity and misfortune. Pilate took him and he scourged him, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns, and they put it on his head, and they threw on him a purple robe. Now those thorns, I have an imitation in my office. Those thorns are like this big. Some of them even bigger. And they wrap them all together to make this fake crown, and then they shove it down on his head after he's already been beaten. And they're mocking him because he's called King of the Jews, which he was, rightly so. So they throw this purple robe on him after they've cut up his back. Now you know what's going to happen. Blood coagulates, right? It's going to stick to his back. And I can promise you they didn't pour a little water on it when they pulled it off of it. They just pulled it off of him, I'm sure. Now, there is no mistake here that the writer of Hebrews is saying that Jesus uses extreme measures in our lives to teach us his ways. Now, I'm of the belief that if you and I listen to him, there's times when he doesn't need to use extreme measures. You remember those occasional times when with your kids when you said, "Hey, go clean up your room," and they said, "Okay." I mean, it may have only been once in your life, but you remember that one time they said, "Okay." And with us, if God tells us to do something and we say, "Okay," there's no further need, right? It's a done deal. But how about if we don't listen? How about if he tells us and we don't listen? How about if we go through a lot of our life and we have so many people tell us that we're a jerk? And God says, "Here's what you need to do to change it." And you go, "No, it's not me. No, it's not me. No, it's not me. No, it's not me. No, it's not me." He's going to use other methods to be able to get that point across to you and I. It could be the loss of your whole family. Now, I know that it's, especially in the climate we have today, some people are going to go, "Well, That's abuse. And the Lord would never abuse his children. Well, you're correct on some of that. But the conclusion depends upon your definition of abuse. Like I said, everybody's abused today. Everybody's abused today. And depending upon how your children are raised and what they're taught and what they're indoctrinated, one day they're probably going to accuse you of that because you got a little rough with them, because you had to take the door off of their room, because you had to take everything out of the room because they wouldn't listen, and you had to start taking things away in their life to be able to try to get them to listen. Boy, that's abusive. You're a horrible parent. No, you're not. No, you're not. Now, I know that things change from generation to generation to generation, but maybe that's why we have so few real men today. Because they've been softened up without any discipline. Or maybe it's just because the dads have all left home and left everything to mom. But nonetheless, God, this is our rule book. This is our rule book. Our rule book is the Bible. Let me read a few things to you. Proverbs 10:13. Wisdom is found in the lips of him who has understanding, but a rod is for the back of him who is devoid of understanding. Whoa! I can remember being disciplined by my mom, and we would be standing by a tree. She had nothing, and she'd break a branch off of that tree, and she'd whip my rear end. And I hate her for it. No, I don't. I love my mom tremendously. That's just the way it was. I needed it. I needed that. I needed that. I deserved that. Now, I am in no way advocating abuse. No way advocating abuse. There's a limit to anything that you do there. Proverbs 26:3, a whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the fool's back. Focus on the fool, not the rod. Focus on the fool. Proverbs 29:15, the rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. What does that mean, left to himself? Let him do whatever he wants. Here's another thing you see on YouTube, and that is, I don't know if it's Facebook or YouTube, one or the other, but you see these kids who are like 3 years old using the F word, and they record it and put it on Facebook. Oh, that's so cute. No, it's not. What do you think they're going to say to you at 15? A child left to himself brings shame to his mother. And I'd like to say to his father. But in today's economy, it's probably, or at least in a lot of cases, it's the mom who's doing all of the raising. But moms, don't go soft. Don't go soft. Teach that little one manners. Discipline that little one. It's not because you don't love them, it's because you do love them. Teach them respect for other people. Don't let the child grow up to be, as the Bible calls it, a fool. Because that means there's going to be a lot of discipline in that child's life. Either through school, either through police officers, or prison. One of the others, but it'll come. The lack that we give them will be made up for by the state. Proverbs 22:15, foolish is bound up in the heart of a child. There's such a sweetness to a child. You take a little child of any race, born into any family, and they're so stinking cute. They're just cute. They're awesome. You just want to pick them up and give them a hug because they're so innocent and they are so sweet. What happens to them when they turn 15 or 16 or 18? A lot of that is the hatred mom and dad put in them. A lot of them is the bigotry that mom and dad put in them, whichever side of the coin you're on. They learn a lot of that stuff from us and the things that come out of our mouths. It says, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. Now, to give you an idea of how much things have changed, and I shared this with you guys before, but our high school woodshop teacher was also the football coach. If you were late for Hunter's class, Mr. Hunter's class, you automatically went to what was called the launching pad. And it was in front of the table saw, turned the other direction, and there was 2 feet drawn. And if you were late for his class, you went and you stood and put your feet on there, and you bent over, and he came along with a wooden paddle, and he gave you 1, 2, 3 swats with that thing. I don't hate Mr. Hunter. I was only on that pad once, and that was it. I never had to go on that pad anymore. But I think I've shared with you before, and that some of your buddies would try to hold you outside. If they knew you had Mr. Hunter's class the next time, they would try to hold you outside the door so that you couldn't get in there before the doorbell rang, before the school bell rang, so that they knew you'd have to go and get a SWAT. Now, do I look on that and go, boy, what an abusive situation? And I'll tell you what was abuse, and that was one time Mr. Hunter was going to discipline one of the guys. And this guy was a bit of a gangster, right? And he was like, you ain't doing nothing to me. And he goes, yeah, you are. You're going to take your medicine like anybody else. And he pulls a square. Some of you know what a square is. They pulled a square off of the rack, and he goes, you ain't coming to me. That's the fool. He got kicked out of school, never really amounted to much of anything, because he just didn't let the discipline take place in his life. Not just what took place in the woodshop, but that was a result of a lot of life of doing whatever he wanted to do rather than doing what was necessary to be done. Now, it's important to understand that God does not consider working with his children as abuse. He considers it necessary and a logical course of action to drive the stupidity from his children's lives. But keep this in mind. With God, his motivation is always love. Without love, it could be abuse. But with love, that's what controls it. Look at Hebrews 12, 7 and 8. He says, if you endure the chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate sons and, you are illegitimate and not sons. An illegitimate son is one born to a woman out of wedlock that no man will claim as his own. That's what he's talking about. There's no parental guidance. There's no dad there to be able to correct and to be able to help that young man. So the implication here is if we endure, that means to bear bravely and calmly those things that come into our life, God deals with us as sons and daughters. And we love our sons and daughters. But if we reject that chastening, we're like illegitimate children. Look at verses 9 and 10. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, right? And we paid them respect. Less now than maybe before, but shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits, that means Jesus Christ, and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them. Now that's key, as seemed best to them, but he for our profit. Let's face it, as parents, sometimes you just get angry. You get angry at the rebellion, and when you go in and you discipline, you have to really check that. You really have to say, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for him or them? But he, for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Earthly parents do their best. I'm not trying to lay any trip on parents. It's hard work, and you're never going to do it perfectly. And you're always, at the end of life, you're going to look back and wish you could have done it better. That's life. So you're not going to do it perfectly. But even though you do your best, again, you just can't come to that perfection that Jesus Christ has. We're just human. We make mistakes. But yet, even in the long run, most of us end up loving and respecting our parents in spite of their faults and in spite of the disciplines that they gave us. But how much more so with a father who is perfect? How much more so for a father who's perfect? He knows exactly what we need and exactly what's too much. He knows exactly what's profitable and what's not profitable. And he never makes a decision out of anger. We do, but he does not. In verse 10, as it said, it gives us even more assurance that even though his ways and methods may seem harsh to us a lot of times, they're always motivated out of love. Look at verses 11 through 13. It says, now no chastening seems to be joyful at the present. When we get told no, we don't like it. That's just life. No chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be dislocated, but rather be healed. In other words, pull yourself together, man, and realize you have a good Father that loves you very much. Now, if we willingly submit to that without giving in to sin, it produces that peaceable fruit of righteousness. It produces something in our life. It makes us into the men and women that God designed us to be, that he wants us to be. And that's the fullness of life, is submitting to the will of God. But again, if we take the back door, the hands hanging down, the feeble knees, the crooked paths, the dislocated joints, those are all signs of discouragement and defeat. How could this happen to me? I can't believe that this is. But see, if you know that behind this God has a reason, that God has a purpose, it's different. It's different. If you know you have a good Father that loves you, and you can look at this and just say, you know, Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. If we're able to look at that and say, I know God means this for good, because I know who he is. I know that he's a good man. I know that he's a good God. And I know he's doing this for me. He's doing this for, I know it hurts. Some of you guys have lifted weights and you know how much it can hurt. But you reap the benefits of it. Some of you are on a diet. You can't have a banana split anymore. And it hurts. But you reap the benefits of it. James 1:2, it says, my brothers, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. And patience having its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Now we know Jesus is the only one that's perfect, but God is perfecting us. He's getting some of that old stuff out that we learned that maybe wasn't so good and trying to change that in our lives. Verses 14 through 17, Hebrews 12, 14, 17. Pursue peace with all people. That would be a good thing for today's world, don't you think? Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Verse 15, looking carefully, lest anyone falls short of the grace of God. You know what the grace of God is? It's giving what people don't deserve. People might not deserve your forgiveness, but give it to them anyway. Let the grudges go. They don't help anyone. All they do is seek to divide. And if we say, okay, maybe it hasn't been so good up until now. Maybe I have made a lot of mistakes, but I can change today. Today I can say, God, by your mercy and by your grace, not my will, but your will be done. Give me the ability to put this aside and move forward. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterwards, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. And I don't know why, but I just flashed on some of these robberies that take place. You know, you have 1 or 2 or 3 young people breaking into a store, right? To get something, right? To get something for free. And they don't realize that the guy behind the counter has a gun. So he opens fire and he shoots one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them. How does that register as being profitable? How does that register as being profitable? How is it worth giving your life to take something that doesn't belong to you? God's saying, I want your life to be profitable. I started to say prosperous, but not always. But spiritually, yes. So he's saying he wants us to grow. I'm going to read 17. And you know that afterwards, when he wanted to inherit the blessings, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. He's saying, don't get sidetracked. Guys, we need to not get sidetracked. There's a lot of things to sidetrack us, but Romans 12:18 said, if it's possible, sometimes it's not possible to live at peace with everybody. Some people do not want peace, but you can grant it anyway. You can forgive them whether they want to be forgiven or not. As much as possible as depends on you. So maybe this morning, give it up. Is it easy? Of course not. But if we don't give it up, there's a bitterness that sets into our heart. And that bitterness will just grow and grow and grow. It's like a cancer. And it'll just spread, and it'll be there until we finally give it over to the Lord. It's like a sore that never heals. And everything is sifted through that bitterness. For a wife, it may be what some other date or previous husband did. For a guy, it could be anything. But then the other person suffers for the one that's with them now. They suffer for the rest of their life because of something someone else did years ago. Got to let it go. There's some losses that we cannot afford. There are some things that are too dear to lose. And I'll tell you what, it's that relationship with Jesus. It's too precious to let go.